The winter wind slammed against the chapel door as Aiden Cross stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. He froze. A little girl lay beside a coffin, her tiny hand resting on the cold wood, whispering, "Mama, it's time to wake up." The candles flickered, the air heavy with grief. Something in that voice pierced him, familiar and possible. He took a step closer, and then saw the photograph on the coffin lid. His blood ran cold. The woman inside was the one who once saved his life. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. The first snow of winter had fallen softly over the small mountain town of Asheville. The streets were quiet, muffled under a blanket of white. Inside the little wooden chapel on Maple Street, a faint glow from a few flickering candles painted the walls with trembling light. The air smelled faintly of pine and cold air and grief. In the front pew, a small girl lay curled up beside a wooden coffin, her head resting against it as if it were her mother's lap. Her name was Hazel Quinn, and she had not left that spot in 3 days. Every so often, she would whisper softly, "Mama, I'm right here. I'm not scared." Her mother, Elara Quinn, had been gone for less than a week. The neighbors said she was taken too soon. The police said it was an accident. But no one really knew what had happened, and no one cared enough to ask. In the corner of the chapel sat Reverend Caleb Myers, his hands clasped in silent prayer. He had offered the chapel for free because Hazel had no one else. There was no father, no family, no money for a funeral. Only a few kind souls from the town had brought food and candles. Hazel wore a small gray coat that used to belong to her mother. It hung loose on her tiny frame. In her hand, she clutched a worn piece of paper, a crayon drawing of 2 people holding hands beneath falling snow. Above them, she had written in crooked letters, "Me and Mommy." Outside, the wind howled through the night. Inside, the girl's soft breathing was the only sound. Every so often, she'd reach out to touch the coffin, her lips moving in silent words no one could hear. On the third night, a man stood at the doorway of the chapel. He wasn't from town. His black coat was dusted with snow, and his eyes carried the kind of sadness that never really left a person. His name was Aiden Cross, a young millionaire whose face had been on magazine covers, known for building medical software that was saving hospitals millions. But at that moment, none of that mattered. He had been on his way to a business meeting when his car broke down near the old chapel. Seeing the light through the window, he'd gone inside to ask for help. But the sight before him stopped him in his tracks. A little girl fast asleep beside a coffin. Her cheeks were red from the cold, her hair tangled, her hands still clutching the drawing. Something about the scene, so innocent, so unbearably human, made his chest tighten. He approached slowly, kneeling down beside her. "Sweetheart," he whispered, "you shouldn't sleep here." "It's too cold." Hazel stirred, blinking up at him with sleepy eyes. "It's okay," she murmured. "Mama doesn't like it when I leave her alone." For a moment, Aiden couldn't speak. There was something about that face, those soft brown eyes, the shape of her nose that made his memory stir. Then he looked at the name written on the coffin, Elara Quinn. The name hit him like thunder. 15 years ago, when he had been a hungry teenager wandering through this same town, it was a waitress named Elara who had given him a hot meal, a few dollars, and a note that said, "Be kind, even when the world isn't." He had kept that note for years, tucked inside his wallet like a prayer. Now here she was gone, and the little girl beside her was all that remained. Aiden felt his throat close as tears filled his eyes. He turned away, but it was too late. The flood had come. He covered his face, his body trembling silently. Reverend Caleb stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's been here every night," he said. "She doesn't want to leave her mother." Aiden nodded, unable to speak. He stared at the coffin again, then at the fragile child beside it, and in that moment he made a silent vow, one that would change everything. He would find out what really happened to Elara Quinn. He would not let her kindness die in vain. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the town in the white silence. Inside the chapel, the candles flickered weakly, their flames trembling against the darkness, as if fighting to stay alive just a little longer. And there, between the cold coffin and the fading light, a story of love loss and redemption quietly began. The next morning, the snow had stopped, leaving a thin veil of frost on the chapel windows. Aiden Cross sat quietly on one of the wooden pews, watching Hazel eat a small piece of bread the pastor had brought. Her little hands trembled as she held it, but her face stayed calm, almost too calm for a child who had lost everything. Reverend Caleb approached, his breath misting in the cold air. "She hasn't spoken much since her mother passed," he said softly. "Only when she's talking to the coffin." Aiden looked toward the front of the chapel. "What will happen to her now?" The pastor sighed. "Social services will come. They always do. She has no known relatives, no money, and the landlord is selling the house. Poor thing might end up in foster care." Foster care. The words hit Aiden like ice water. He had been there once 2 years ago in homes that smelled of bleach and fear. The memory made his stomach twist. He stood abruptly, adjusting his coat. "Not if I can help it," he said. Hazel looked up at him, crumbs on her lip. "Are you an angel?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He knelt down, his throat tightening. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "Just someone who owes your mama a very big thank you." Hazel blinked. "You knew Mama?" Aiden nodded. "A long time ago. She helped me when nobody else would." The little girl studied his face for a long time. Then she reached into her small coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the same crayon drawing she'd been clutching the night before, two figures holding hands under falling snow. But this time Aiden noticed something he hadn't before: a small heart drawn between the two figures, and inside the heart, a tiny silver mark, almost like a scribble. "She said this heart was special," Hazel whispered. "She said it keeps me safe." Aiden looked closer. The silver mark wasn't a scribble. It looked like the shape of a pendant, a small necklace drawn with a strange symbol on it. He felt a faint chill run down his spine. "Hazel," he said softly, "did your mama have a necklace like this?" She nodded. "Yes, she never took it off, but it's gone now, gone." Reverend Caleb crossed himself silently. "When we found her, he said there were things missing. The police called it theft, but I felt something wasn't right. Her body was found in a warehouse far from here. No one could explain why she was there." Aiden's jaw tightened. "A warehouse, yes," the pastor said quietly, "off Route 21. They said it was an accident, that she'd collapsed there." But he stopped, glancing toward Hazel. The whole thing was strange. No ID, no medical record, just a Jane Doe tag. We only knew it was her because of the child's testimony. Aiden's pulse began to race. He remembered the name that had funded his hospital project, PureAid Foundation. The same name he'd seen on the contracts lying on his desk just a week ago. They claimed to fund ethical medical research, but something about their methods had always made him uneasy. He turned toward the pastor. "Do you still have her belongings?" Caleb nodded toward a small box near the altar. Inside were a few worn clothes, a Bible, a single photograph, and a folded medical form, half torn, the ink smudged from moisture. Aiden picked it up carefully. His eyes froze on a faint logo printed in the corner. PureAid Foundation. He felt his stomach drop. The world around him seemed to tilt slightly. He had spent the last 5 years building software for medical transparency, ensuring hospitals stayed ethical, and yet somehow his own investors were funding the very evil he'd vowed to fight. Hazel tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Aiden, are you okay?" He forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart." But his hands trembled as he folded the paper back into the box. That evening, after Hazel finally fell asleep on one of the chapel benches, Aiden stepped outside into the crisp winter night. The town was quiet, bathed in a pale orange glow from the streetlights. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Eli, I need you to look into something," he said. "PureAid Foundation. I want every document, every partner, every board member tonight." There was a pause on the other end. "Sir, they're our biggest investors. Just do it." Aiden snapped, then lowered his voice. Quietly, he ended the call and stood in the snow for a long moment. His breath came out in clouds. Somewhere deep inside, he could still hear Elara's voice that day 15 years ago, when she'd handed him a sandwich and smiled. "Be kind, even when the world isn't." He whispered into the cold. "I wasn't kind enough, was I?" A sudden sound behind him made him turn. Hazel was standing at the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, her small face pale under the moonlight. "Are you leaving?" she asked ease. Aiden hesitated. Then he walked back to her, knelt down, and brushed the snow from her hair. "No, Hazel, I'm not leaving you. Not ever." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Mama said good people don't disappear." He swallowed hard. She was right. As the church bell rang softly in the distance, Aiden knew that his life had just changed forever. The world of contracts, profits, and shareholders felt meaningless now. Somewhere out there in the dark corners of the city were people who had stolen a mother's life, and he was going to find them. The snow began to fall again, quietly, endlessly, as if the heavens themselves were listening. The following week unfolded in a blur of phone calls, files, and sleepless nights. Aiden Cross barely left his apartment overlooking downtown Asheville. His assistant Eli had sent him over 100 pages of confidential reports about PureAid Foundation, none of them reassuring. On the surface, the organization appeared spotless, humanitarian, transparent, full of smiling photos and charity numbers. But beneath the surface, patterns began to emerge: identical payments sent to abandoned warehouses, anonymous contractors, and unrecorded surgeries filed under overseas research. Aiden rubbed his temples, his laptop screen glowing coldly in the dark. Each new document painted the same haunting picture: PureAid was buying lives. He stared at a faded photo of Elara Quinn, clipped to the file, her kind smile, her gentle eyes. He remembered the way Hazel had said, "Mama doesn't like it when I leave her alone." He whispered to himself, "You didn't deserve this, Elara. None of you did." At dawn, he drove to Route 21 to the warehouse where Elara's body had been found. The building was abandoned, half swallowed by weeds, its rusted door chained shut. Inside, dust coated the floor like snow. In one corner lay a torn medical curtain, a broken IV pole, and dark stains that had never been cleaned. Aiden felt his chest tighten. Someone had turned this place into a surgery room. He crouched, running his fingers across the floor, and found a small metallic tag half buried in the dust. It read Reed EMD. His breath caught. Derbarsh Elias Reed, a name that had appeared in one of PureAid's earlier reports. A respected surgeon who had vanished 2 years ago after personal health leave. Aiden pocketed the tag and drove straight to Detective Rowan Hale's house. The retired officer lived in a small cabin on the edge of town, his porch cluttered with old tools and faded police badges. When Aiden showed him the tag, Rowan's eyes narrowed. "I know that name," he muttered. "Reed used to work at St. Matthew's Hospital. Quiet guy, good hands. Then one day he was gone. Rumor said he got mixed up with the wrong people." Aiden leaned forward. "Could he be involved with the PureAid?" Rowan took a deep breath. "I can't say for sure, but I've heard whispers: bodies showing up without paperwork, people disappearing after signing donation agreements. The cops don't touch it. Too many high-ranking hands taking a cut." Aiden clenched his jaw. "Then I'll touch it." Rowan gave a faint smirk. "You're a brave kid. Or stupid." "Maybe both," Aiden replied. That evening, Aiden met Vera Lang at a quiet diner near the city limits. She arrived wearing a gray coat and tired eyes, clutching a camera and a stack of notes. "I heard you're digging into PureAid," she said, sliding into the booth. "You're either a hero or a dead man." "Maybe a little of both," Aiden said. "You've investigated them before, haven't you?" Vera nodded. "I tried 2 years ago. My editor killed the story after our main source disappeared. His name was Elias Reed." Aiden pulled the metal tag from his pocket and set it on the table. "He didn't disappear. He's hiding." Vera stared at the tag, her lips parting slightly. "Then we find him. He's the key." They spent hours piecing together every scrap of information: hospital records, old licenses, anonymous tips. By midnight, they found a lead: an unregistered cabin deep in Pisgah Forest, rented under an alias. The next morning, they drove through winding roads dusted with snow until the forest swallowed the sky. The cabin appeared like a ghost between the trees, smoke curling faintly from its chimney. Aiden approached the door, heart pounding. He knocked once. Silence. Then footsteps. The door creaked open, revealing a gaunt man with gray-streaked hair and haunted eyes. "Dr. Reed?" Aiden asked. The man's eyes darted from Aiden to Vera. "I told them I was done," he whispered. "I told them I'd never—" "We're not from PureAid," Vera said softly. "We're here about Elara Quinn." The name froze him. He backed away, gripping the doorframe. She shouldn't have died," he murmured. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." Aiden stepped closer. "Then tell us what did happen." Reed's face crumpled. They told her it was safe. They said they'd pay for her child's operation. She believed them, but they botched the anesthesia. When she started crashing, they panicked. No one wanted to call an ambulance, too much risk, too many questions, so they let her die. Then they sold her organs overseas. Silence filled the cabin. The only sound was the wind outside whispering through the trees. Aiden's hands trembled, and the people behind it Raid met his eyes. PureAid's board, the same men your company partners with. For a moment, Aiden couldn't breathe. All his success, his clean reputation, it was built on a foundation of stolen lives. Reed sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. They'll come for me if they know I talked. They always do. Vera set a hand on his shoulder. Then let us protect you. Testify. Help us stop them. Reed looked up slowly. If I testify, everything burns. Aiden nodded. Then let it burn. Outside, the forest stood silent beneath the weight of winter. Snow began to fall again, covering their footprints, as if the earth itself wanted to hide what had just been said. But Aiden knew there was no going back. He had stepped into the darkness, and now he had to drag the truth into the light. The following days felt like walking on glass. Every step Aiden took was shadowed by danger. After meeting Reed, things began to move too fast. Vera published a discreet article online under an alias hinting at a medical foundation trading organs under false charity fronts. Within 24 hours, the article vanished. Her email account was deleted, her editor fired. They know, she whispered, staring at the blank computer screen. They're watching us. Aiden's phone buzzed. An anonymous message flashed across the screen. Stop digging or the girl disappears. His blood ran cold. Hazel. He raced to the chapel. The wooden door stood ajar, snow blowing in from outside. Reverend Caleb lay on the floor, a bruise on his temple, but still breathing. They took her, he gasped. 2 men, dark suits, black vans, said they were from child services. Aiden's pulse thundered in his ears. Which direction? South, toward the highway. Without another word, Aiden ran back into the storm, his tires screaming against the icy road. Beside him, Vera clutched her camera, her face pale but determined. They're not gonna hurt her, Aiden said through gritted teeth. They just want to scare us. Vera's voice trembled. They'll do more than that if we don't move fast. 2 miles out of town, they spotted a black van parked behind an abandoned motel. The windows were tinted, the engine idling. Aiden killed his headlights, parking behind a snowbank. He turned to Vera. Stay here. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, call Rowan. Before she could protest, he slipped into the dark, moving like a shadow. The snow muffled his footsteps. He crept to the side door, the motel, heart pounding. Inside, muffled voices echoed. The boss wants her quiet until the meeting's over. Aiden peered through a crack. Hazel sat tied to a chair, trembling, her small face streaked with tears. One of the men checked his phone. We should have dumped her already. Too risky. Not yet, the other growled. Orders say wait. Rage surged through Aiden's veins. He scanned the room, a metal pipe leaning by the wall. Quietly, he picked it up, then burst through the door. The first man barely turned before Aiden swung. The pipe crashed against his arms, sending him sprawling. The second lunged, grabbing Aiden's coat, but Aiden drove his elbow into the man's ribs. They fell against the table, scattering papers and syringes. Hazel screamed, Aiden. He turned, cutting her ropes with a pocket knife. It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Before they could leave, headlights flashed outside. More vehicles. Vera's voice echoed from the doorway. Aiden, we have to go. He grabbed Hazel, sprinting through the back exit just as men stormed in. Bullets shattered the windows, sparks flying across the dark hallway. They dove into the snow, racing for the car. Vera floored them yet as they sped away, headlights slicing through the night. Hazel clung to Aiden, sobbing. He held her close, whispering, I've got you. No one will ever take you again. They didn't stop until they reached Detective Rowan's cabin. The old man opened the door, shotgun in hand. What in God's name? They tried to take her. Aiden panted, PureAid's people. Rowan cursed under his breath. Then it's worse than I thought. He locked the door and drew the curtains. If they're that desperate, you've hit a nerve. Vera set her camera on the table. We need to go public, now. Live stream evidence, everything. Rowan shook his head. They'll shut it down before it reaches 10 people. Aiden turned to Dr. Reed, who sat silently by the fire, his face pale. You said you wanted redemption. This is your chance, Reed hesitated. If I go on record, I'm a dead man. Aiden's voice hardened. So was Elara. She died trying to save her child. You can save hundreds. Reed looked up, his eyes glistening. Then we do it my way. He reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive. Every contract, every operation, every name. I copied them before I ran. You release this and PureAid burns. Vera's eyes widened. This is enough to take down half their network. Rowan nodded grimly. Then we go big. Federal big. That night, they transmitted the files to every major news outlet and legal authority across the state. Within hours, the internet exploded. Hashtags, outrage, and investigations erupted nationwide. By dawn, PureAid's board members were issuing statements of denial. But it was too late. Their empire of lies was crumbling. As the first light of morning crept over the mountains, Aiden stepped outside. Snowflakes drifted softly around him. Hazel stood beside him, wrapped in a blanket too big for her, staring at the sunrise. Is Mama watching? She asked quietly. Aiden smiled through tired eyes. I think she is, and I think she's proud. Hazel reached out her small hand, pointing toward the sky. Look, Aiden. The snow stopped. He looked up. She was right. For the first time in weeks, the clouds had parted, letting through a streak of pale gold sunlight. He whispered, then maybe the world is starting to thaw. Behind them, the cabin door creaked open. Vera stepped out, holding her phone. It's happening, she said. Federal agents are moving in. Aiden exhaled, closing his eyes. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, hope felt real. The news broke like a storm. Within hours, the story of PureAid Foundation's hidden crimes spread across every major network in the country. Anonymous sources, leaked contracts, and medical records filled the airwaves. The public was furious. Federal agents raided warehouses across several states, uncovering illegal surgeries, falsified death certificates, and missing persons reports. Aiden Cross found himself at the center of it all. He stood before a wall of cameras outside the courthouse in Asheville, the air-biting cold reporters shouting his name. The world had learned that one of its youngest millionaires had turned against his own investors. Vera Lang stood beside him, her camera hanging at her side. Dr. Reed, pale but resolute, waited in the shadow of the building under federal protection. You don't have to do this, Vera murmured. Aiden shook his head. Yes, I do. Elara deserves to be heard. He stepped forward as microphones were thrust toward him. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. 5 years ago, I partnered with a foundation I believed was saving lives. Today, I've learned that it was built on the suffering of innocent people. One of them was a woman named Elara Quinn, a mother who sold her body to save her child. She believed in hope, and that hope killed her own. The crowd went silent. Cameras clicked. Someone whispered Elara's name. Aiden continued, I am here to tell you that her story will not be buried. Her daughter is alive because she refused to give up. And because of that, we have the chance to be better, to rebuild trust in compassion. Behind him, Vera recorded every word, her hands shaking. She knew this was more than a statement. It was a reckoning. Inside the courthouse, the hearing began. PureAid's lawyers sat stiffly, their faces pale. Across from them sat Dr. Reed, ready to testify. Rowan Hale, wearing his old police badge, stood quietly by the door, guarding the witnesses. The prosecutor's voice echoed through the chamber. Dr. Reed, can you confirm that these procedures were performed without legal authorization? Yes, Reed said, his voice trembling. We were told the donors were volunteers, but they were desperate people, poor, sick, and lied to. Elara Quinn was one of them. She never knew it would kill her. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. The judge banged the gavel for silence. Reed's eyes met Aiden's across the courtroom. I can't undo what I did, he said softly, but I can make sure it never happens again. Aiden nodded once silently, thanking him. When the hearing adjourned, reporters swarmed, but Aiden didn't stay. He slipped out through a side door into the cold afternoon air. Vera followed him, calling his name, but he kept walking until he reached the old chapel on Maple Street. The snow had melted into patches of silver water. Inside, the coffin was gone, replaced by a simple photograph of Elara surrounded by fresh flowers. Reverend Caleb was lighting a candle. She'd be proud, he said quietly as Aiden entered. Aiden gazed at the photo. She shouldn't have had to die to change the world. The Reverend nodded. Sometimes light finds its way through the cracks of loss. A small voice broke the silence. Aiden? He turned. Hazel stood in the doorway holding a heart-shaped locket in her hand, the same one drawn in her picture. They found this in Mama's box, she said. The nice lady from the hospital gave it to me. Aiden knelt down. May I see it? Hazel opened the locket. Inside was a tiny photo of her as a baby and a folded note that read, For my Hazel, my heart will always be with you. Tears filled his eyes. He looked at the little girl and whispered, She never stopped loving you. Hazel smiled through her tears. She said good people always come back. Aiden took a deep breath. Then I guess she did through you. Outside, the chapel bell began to ring. The town that had once turned away from Elara now gathered outside with the candles in hand. People sang softly, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Vera appeared beside them, filming the moment quietly. The world was watching again, but this time not for scandal, but for grace. Hazel slipped her small hand into Aiden's. Are we going home now? He looked down at her, the weight of months lifting from his shoulders. Yes, Hazel, he said. We're going home. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the snow-dusted hills. For the first time in a long time, Aiden felt warmth not from the fire of anger, but from something deeper, something like peace. Somewhere in the wind, he thought he heard Elara's voice again, soft and kind. Be kind, even when the world isn't. And this time he whispered back, I will. A year passed. Winter had come again to Asheville, softer this time, as if the world itself had learned how to be gentle. The chapel on Maple Street now looked brighter. Its old wooden doors, freshly painted, a small sign above them reading, the Elara Heart Foundation. Inside, laughter filled the air. Children were drawing at long tables, crayons scattered like little rainbows. In one corner, Hazel Quinn sat with her sketchbook, her face glowing beneath the warm light. She had grown taller, stronger. The surgery on her heart had gone well paid for by the very foundation named after her mother. Aiden Cross stood nearby, watching her with quiet pride. He had traded boardrooms for classrooms, contracts for causes. The world still called him a millionaire, but he no longer cared about the number beside his name. What mattered now were the hearts beating in that little room. Reverend Caleb approached smiling. You've built something good here, Aiden. Aiden nodded. No, he said softly. Elara built this. I just followed where her kindness led. The Reverend looked at Hazel. She's a lot like her mother. Yes, Aiden said, his voice low. Same eyes, same strength. Hazel looked up from her drawing and ran over holding a piece of paper. Look, she said excitedly. It was a picture of three people, Hazel in the middle, holding hands with her mother on one side and Aiden on the other. Above them she had written, Home is where love stays. Aiden felt a lump rise in his throat. That's beautiful, Hazel, she grinned. It's for Mama. Can we hang it by her photo? He smiled. Of course. They walked to the front of the room where a framed picture of Elara hung beside a single candle. Hazel carefully taped her drawing next to it, stepping back to admire her work. Now she can see it every day, she said. Aiden knelt beside her. She already does. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and slow. The children pressed their faces to the window, laughing as flakes danced in the wind. Aiden watched them, feeling something he hadn't known in years, peace that didn't ache. Vera Lang entered quietly, her camera in hand. Still can't believe how far this place has come, she said. People all over the country are donating. Hospitals are calling to start partnerships. You did it, Aiden, he shook his head. No, we did. And maybe now someone like Elara won't have to choose between her life and her child's. Vera smiled faintly. You know, she said some stories don't end in tragedy. They just find a better beginning. Aiden looked around the room, the light, the children, the laughter, and nodded. Yeah, he said softly. This one finally did. As the afternoon light faded, Hazel tugged on his sleeve. Aiden, can we go outside? I want to show you something. They stepped into the snowy yard. Hazel pointed toward the sky, where the first star of evening glimmered faintly through the clouds. Mama used to tell me, she said, that when the first star comes out, it means someone's watching over you. Aiden followed her gaze, his breath forming a small cloud in the cold air. Then she's watching both of us, he whispered. Hazel smiled, slipping her small hand into his. Together they stood in silence, snow settling gently around them. The world was quiet but not empty. It was full of the love that remained, the kind that doesn't fade, not even after goodbye. Inside the chapel, the candle beside Elara's picture flickered steady and bright. And outside, beneath the soft winter sky, Aiden Cross finally understood what Elara had meant all those years ago. Be kind even when the world isn't. Because in the end, kindness was the only thing that truly stayed. Today's story comes to an end, but its echo still lingers in the heart. What do you think? Give us a score from 1 to 10 and feel free to share a few words in the comments. Every voice here is valued and heard. Before you go, let me ask you gently, are you doing okay today? If your heart feels heavy, let this place be a quiet corner where you can share and find comfort. See you again in the next bedtime story, where love and hope remind us that no matter how dark the night may seem, kindness will always prevail.